My name is, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Hoda. I have the pleasure of being your host tonight. I would like to start with the opening prayer. O thou loving provider, these souls have hearkened to the summons of the kingdom and have gazed upon the glory of the Sun of Truth. They have risen upward to the refreshing skies of love. They are enamored of thy nature, and they worship thy beauty. Unto thee have they turned themselves, speaking together of thee, seeking out thy dwelling, and thirsting for the water brooks of thy heavenly realm. Thou art the giver, the bestower, the ever-loving. Abdul Baha. Tonight's topic is why faith matters, and our dear speaker is Dr. John Hatcher. It is truly my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. John Hatcher. Dr. John Hatcher holds a BA and MA in English Literature from Vanderbilt University and PhD in English Literature from the University of Georgia. He was the Director of Graduate Studies in English Literature at the University of South Florida, Tampa. He is a widely published poet and distinguished lecturer. He has written numerous books on literature, philosophy, and Baha'i theology and scripture. Among his many books are Ali's Dream, The Story of Baha'u'llah, The Ascent of Society, The Social Imperative in Personal Salvation, Close Connections, The Bridge Between Spiritual and Physical Reality, The Divine Art of Revelation, The Ocean of His Words, The Purpose of Physical Reality, and many, many, many more. Without further ado, please help me welcome Dr. John Hatcher.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. All right. I'm not accustomed to speaking briefly, but I'm going to try to tonight to save ample time for questions, because I know there are a number of you here tonight who are hearing about the Baha'i Faith for the first time, or else learning a little more in depth about what you've heard so far. So I'm going to give sort of a succinct response. Kambiz comes up with these wonderful topics and says, this is what you're speaking on. And I think, okay, how do I back into that? And so the topic, why faith matters, wasn't my idea. I mean, I have nothing against faith. I'm all for it. But the idea of the topic was his, and so that's what I'm speaking on. After I get through responding to that question with my understanding of what faith means from a Baha'i point of view, and from any other religious perspective as well, I'll open the floor for questions and try as best I can to give a coherent response. Though any of the Baha'is in the room, if you are wanting more information, could get with you afterward and either discuss more further with you tonight what questions you might have, provide you with various resources, or also set up an occasion where you can either through a course or through firesides learn as much as you wish. There is no ministry in the Baha'i Faith, which means we're all winging it to a certain extent, and yet it's still what we like to call an organized religion. Though sometimes I question that. But no, it is, and so part of that organization is aimed at empowering the neighborhood to become the focus of Baha'i activity and learning. We call ourselves a learning community, which implies that we don't think we know everything yet. And we don't. But we know a bit. And I'm going to start off sharing a bit of what I think I know. And we'll proceed from there. Excuse me. Why faith matters. Every time. Why does that happen? Why does that happen? Roger, where are you? Is Roger here or is he gone?
I think he's listening from the other room.
Roger, if you're in the other room, don't answer. Why did that happen? Somebody who's as smart as Roger in here? No one? Yeah. I just dropped my glasses case, or I let go of it, and it went to the ground like that. And I did it again, and that's 3 out of 3 times. Empirically, I could infer through inductive logic an axiom, I think. What do you think the axiom would be? Gravity. Thank you. I knew you would know. And can you state succinctly, for those of us who don't know, what that law entails? Can you describe it briefly?
It's something that as a smaller body is to a larger body, it has to do the square of something or other, but I don't know what that is.
All right. Does anybody know more than Roger about the law of gravity? Can anyone, Gilbert, where are you?
I know. Right here.
I know Gilbert. What causes this to happen?
It's actually the two definitions of Newtonian law.
I don't want the new physics. Yeah, Newtonian is classic. Give me the Newtonian version, because that's what we use when we're trying to break out of the attraction of the Earth's gravity pull in order to get to the moon.
It's the attraction of two masses, basically.
According to what?
According to basically size of the mass of this.
All right, so this isn't very heavy at all, so it's going to fall according to the force pulling on it, which is what? No. Gravity is the law. What is it? What is causing it to pull? In other words, if I drop this on the moon, it would fall slower. Or no, it wouldn't fall slower. According to Galileo, it would fall the same speed, but it wouldn't weigh as much. Why? Huh? Size of the moon. The moon's very, very small in comparison to the Earth. So it's going to fall. In other words, on the moon, I wouldn't have to worry about losing 30 pounds because I'd already be, you can sit down now, Gilbert. I'd be about 30 pounds lighter anyhow.
You'd be 50 pounds lighter, John.
50 pounds. That's right where I want to be, Bob. All right. Is that just me or anybody? Well, it depends on what I weigh here, doesn't it? All right. Suffice it to say, then, that if I drop this or I let go of it, it's going to do this 9 out of 10 times. Or is it going to do it every time? If it's a law, it's describing reality and relationships within reality, right? Now, which would be the appropriate verb to use describing this law? I believe in the law of gravity. I have faith in the law of gravity. I know about the law of gravity. I understand the law of gravity. Which sounds the best to you? I know the law of gravity, but you don't understand it. If I said I have faith in the law of gravity, that would mean what? Any of you, and I know you don't, because none of you is as old as I am, except Mogadam, and he's in better shape than I am and plays chess better than I do. Fred Astaire in a movie called Royal Wedding in 1951. Anybody know what happened in that movie? Not the stairs. That's not the stair one. He is dancing. He dances all the way around the room. And you see him. You're looking there in this room, and you see him start dancing, and he's dancing on the wall, and he's dancing on the ceiling. Now that'd be enough to shock you and to say, I'm not sure I have faith in the law of gravity anymore. But of course, if you really have faith in the law of gravity, you know there's got to be another explanation. Anybody know what the explanation was in that movie? Huh? It wasn't a camera trick. The camera was, huh? It was what? A rolling room, a rotating room. So the camera is fixed in relation to the room. The room itself is moving with the camera in place so that as it's changing, he will go towards the edge of the wall, and little by little, as it gets to where that corner is about here, he can then make the transition to the wall and so on. So it's incredibly effective because your point of reference, all right, is the camera's point of reference. And you think you are looking at it objectively. But of course you aren't. You're looking at it subjectively from the point of view of something that is turning. You don't know you're turning, all right? But you, meaning the camera point of view, you are turning. So your faith might be shaken because all it takes is one violation of that law, and you say, wait a minute, it worked every time up till now, but I'm not sure that it works every time. There may be some cases. How many of you have seen these guys who are these street magicians? There's one who levitates. I forget his name, but he's a very conceited, huh? Chris Angel. He levitates? Is he the one that levitates?
He also walks on water.
Yeah, he walks on water. And you start wondering, maybe the guy's come up with something. You know, maybe he has actually learned a way to, if not defy the law of gravity, overcome it with some other force that he's attuned to. You know? So maybe you'll start to have more faith in Chris Angel than you do in the law of gravity. All right. Well, it's important that we understand the perspective from which we're looking at reality. So if we're talking about having faith as opposed to believing or knowing something, I know that's true. When you say that, I know the law of gravity does not stop working. What do you mean by that as opposed to I have faith that the law of gravity works in every circumstance? Is there a nuance of difference there? I know that the law of gravity works. I have faith that the law of gravity works. They could be relatively interchangeable, but what might be a difference? Yes, ma'am. That's a good distinction, and there are a lot of others we could make. But in other words, faith is something you believe as a personal affirmation, whereas knowledge is something that seems to have been empirically demonstrated that others can demonstrate. And of course, you get into the concept of scientific method of repeating the same experience. Yes, it occurred. Well, we repeated it 3 times. But if I dropped it and it suddenly went up, you wouldn't stop believing in the law of gravity. You'd probably say, well, he pulled off a good one there. He probably has a thread. You would try to figure out, how did he trick me? Now, if you saw a video of someone dropping this and it suddenly just stayed there, now, in this day and age, we'd have a very logical explanation. Even if someone assured you that there was nothing holding the thing, which would be what? You might be seeing a video shot of someone on the space shuttle or in the space lab, all right, where gravity is minimal. There's still some gravity, but it doesn't exercise enough force where it's measurable to the human experience. All right. Now, I'm going to give you some expressions so you can see the nuance of difference among these concepts of faith, belief, knowledge, and understanding. They're pretty much interchangeable, but they have slightly different meanings, especially when we start talking about religion. All right? And I'll give you an example of where we're going with this. If someone says, I grew up in the Christian faith, for example, and I know some of you in the audience are of the Christian faith. I would have some ministers who would say to me, you must accept Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, or you're going to hell. And my response was, yeah, I think I should. If that's the alternative, I'll do that. You know, and I remember when my Sunday school teacher, Mrs. Brown, said, okay, I want you all to shut your eyes, and I want anybody who's been saved today stand up. Well, I stood up. You know, I didn't really know if I had been saved or not, and I really didn't have any faith in it, but I was mighty afraid of Mrs. Brown, you know. I don't know if I had the fear of God, but I had the fear of Mrs. Brown. And so, in other words, other ministers would say, here is the basis for belief. Here is some history of who Christ was, what he claimed, and here are the things he said. And you decide if this is not worthy of belief, because here are the things he promised. All right? Well, naturally, the older I got and the more I began to realize that I had the capacity to exert free will and indeed the obligation to examine what I thought about things, I began to examine the basis, and my faith became stronger and my belief became stronger the more I corroborated what the minister was asserting or what Christ was asserting. And the most meaningful of all of that information, that corroboration, was my personal relationship with the metaphysical realm, my conversations with Christ or my conversations with God, because I got answers and I felt, in other words, if you want empirical evidence, that was it for me, you know. But that's a personal thing. That's a subjective thing. I couldn't prove that on the board. But I would put it to you that if I could prove, and of course, as Gilbert showed us last year in presenting my brother's scientific proof of the existence of God, you can prove it on a blackboard or on a PowerPoint mathematically, all right, logically, that God exists, that there is only one God, and what God's intention is. But that doesn't give you faith. It really doesn't give you belief. It may give you knowledge of a sort, how to prove it, but it doesn't induce in you a sense of comfort or personal relationship. So, let me show you what I'm talking about with regard to how we use this language, because it's important. When someone says, do you believe? Do you have faith? Do you understand? Do you know? We're in all of these circumstances, particularly the context in which we're saying them, may mean slightly different things. So, what is the difference among these four terms with people? I'll give you an example. I have faith in you. Of course, part of it is how you inflect the sentence, I have faith in you. No, I have faith in you. I believe in you. I know you, or I know you. That's slightly different too. I understand you. Now, all of those four mean something slightly different, or could in a particular conversation. All right? I have faith in you. I believe in you. Those sound pretty much the same. I know you, which may mean I know you're going to screw up. I understand you, meaning it could mean I know where you're coming from, but I still don't agree with you, or I know why you screwed up, but I still don't forgive you for it. It can mean 1,000 things. All right, let's talk about ideas. Now, we talked about ideas, concepts, about reality, the law of gravity. It's a law. That means it doesn't change. It doesn't change. It's a law. So, in other words, you can't stop it. You can't break it. You can't defy it. You can say, I defy it. You can say, I'm going to jump out this window and defy. But ultimately, the law of gravity will win out on it, because it doesn't care whether you believe in it or not. It's still there. It's impervious to what your perception is. So when you see Gene Kelly dancing on the wall, that if this were reality, he'd be falling on his head. And many people wouldn't care. Because that's the way he was. With ideas then, I have faith in the law of gravity. I believe in the law of gravity. I know the law of gravity. I understand the law of gravity. All right. Now we're going to change these in a minute to other kinds of laws, like spiritual laws. For example, one of the primary beliefs or the pivotal belief of the Baha'i faith is there is one God who is the creator of the universe, and that term designates a cognitive being aware of what he's doing, who plans purposefully to bring about the evolution of human society on planet Earth, and many other planets too, probably, though we don't know about it yet. And he does this, Baha'is believe, by sending guidance as we need it and can use it through individuals we call manifestations. Some religions call them prophets, and so on. So this has to do with a law too, because if that is true, then the law of history is history proceeds according to a specific plan devised by the Creator, whereby incrementally human society is taught in ever more expansive and ever more complete descriptions of reality and our relationship to reality, whether it be physical reality or metaphysical reality. All right. This is a commandment. All right? Commandments, using the same terms, but in a command, what we'd call in grammar the imperative form of the verb. All right? I'm a little warm. Is there a AC that can cool off someone as hot as I am? And I don't mean that metaphorically. Can we reasonably command people to do the following? All right. You must have faith in Sam. Now, Sam is someone you don't know, but just Sam, you can make it Mary or anybody that comes to mind. You must have faith in Sam. And of course, again, we can inflect it slightly different. You must have faith in Sam. I guess you could inflect it. You must have faith in Sam, or something. I don't know. You must believe Sam. You must know Sam. You must know Sam. You must understand Sam. Ideas about reality. Can you command those? You must have faith in the law of gravity. You must believe in the law of gravity. You must know the law of gravity. You must understand the law of gravity. Well, obviously, some of those we can command and some of them we can't. If you're a teacher in a physics class, you can say, you must know the law of gravity because you're having a test on it on Friday. All right? That you can command. All right? But it's hard to command someone to have faith in the law of gravity in a religious sense. But let's not toss that around too much. Let me go on to the next one. How can we rationally be expected to accomplish these tasks in religion? In other words, what I'm leading to is obviously why faith matters. What do we mean by faith is what I'm obviously getting at, and that's what I want to narrow down to. Let's talk about manifestations of God, the emissaries of God, these specialized beings who come to planet Earth to guide us for a particular duration of time, whether it be Moses or Christ or Muhammad or Baha'u'llah or whoever the next manifestation will be. You must have faith in Christ or Muhammad or Baha'u'llah. You must have faith. Can you command that reasonably? I mean, can you expect someone to say, okay? Why? Hey, how are you doing? I hadn't seen you in a while. Good to see you. Because what? Okay, so you can't command someone because faith is a subjective thing. It is emotionally, it's an affective relationship. And you can't command, you can't say, love me. Why can't you say that? I mean, you say it, but that would probably be the worst thing you could do to get someone to love you is command it. Why can't you reasonably expect, if you say to someone, love me, they go, oh, okay. And I mean, they will say okay because you may be about to hit them with a rolling pin or something. But why can't you expect? We have free will, and there's something else in that formula besides free will. What is it? You have to have some evidence within that would substantiate their claim that they should be loved. So in other words, first must come the action demonstrating the love, then the words have some meaning, right? All right, which means you don't really need to say the words in the first place, probably. But at any rate, all right. You must believe in Christ or Muhammad or Baha'u'llah. Not a whole lot of difference. Is there any difference when you say you must have faith or you must believe? Is there any? I don't see a whole lot of difference. Pretty much the same. Though believe would have more of a connotation of investigate for yourself and you will come to believe. It could have that connotation. You must believe, and I'll show you how to believe, as opposed to faith, which is, from a Western point of view particularly, faith is a leap. We talk about a leap of faith. So we talk about the distinction between faith and belief or knowledge in the sense that faith is believing that which cannot be empirically demonstrated, whereas belief or knowledge is something that you know after it has been demonstrated. So we talk about blind faith, all right? Yes, my child. Okay, thank you very much. You must know Christ, or you must know Muhammad, or you must know Baha'u'llah. That is a little bit different. What does that imply? Learn about. Okay, good. Yeah, again, not a whole lot of difference, but the sense of it is it would really be to your benefit to learn about these figures and their lives and their relationship to you. So there you're not asking for belief as a religious creed of faith or a religious commitment. You're just saying you really would do well to know about these figures and what they claim. Right? Thank you. You must understand Christ. You must understand Muhammad. You must understand Baha'u'llah. I'm leaving out Moses simply because I didn't have room, but we can include Moses in there. You must understand them. What would that connote? A little bit different still. Hey, Abby. What would that mean? You must understand them.
It would give you reasons to believe or to have faith in them when you have the knowledge.
If Christ says, as he did to Philip, Philip says in John, he says to, Philip says, he says, I'm going to the Father. If I don't go to the Father, then I can't return. If I don't go away. Philip says, show us the Father, and we'll be satisfied. He says, have I been with you so long, and you do not know me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father, for I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. And then he goes on to say, or else if you don't understand that, just follow me because you like what I do, the works I do. So in other words, implying there are different ways you will understand me. You may just be attracted to what I do and the way I act. Fine. If that's the level you can relate to me, do that. But if you really understand me on a deeper level, you'll know that the Father is working through me. For nothing I do on my own, but the Father who is in me speaks through me. All right? Religious concepts about reality. One of the most important concepts in the faith, as I said, is this idea of what we call progressive revelation. Namely, the idea that revelation just isn't cyclical. You don't just have one teacher come and then another teacher comes and then another teacher comes. We're getting somewhere. So that the concept of justice that Moses brought is very primitive from our modern jurisprudence point of view. All right? So if we utilize the law of God brought by Moses, we'd be arrested real quick. You stole my wallet, boom, there goes your hand. Sorry about that, but that's the law. And they would arrest you and sue you and so on. And the guy who stole your wallet would probably get medical benefits while you are in prison. All right? Because we've come to a more progressive and enlightened and necessarily more complex concept of justice. It's not so simple. So it's different when you're trying to keep order among a rebellious group of tribal peoples and you're in a complex, enmeshed in a complex system in a society such as ours where people are going 1,000 different directions and living so close together. We step outside this building and there are 1,000 laws and relationships that are understood. And justice is a very complex thing. So you must have faith in progressive revelation. You must believe in the concept of progressive revelation. You must know the concept of progressive revelation. You must understand the concept of revelation. Well, I don't need to belabor this too much, so let me go on and kind of finish this up with this. We're talking about really two processes here. We're talking about understanding or knowledge or faith that is based on the desire for something to be true, as opposed to knowledge or faith or belief based on some sort of personal investigation of the basis for that statement of truth. One of the primary principles of the Baha'i faith is that beliefs that have not been investigated are not really yours in the first place. you are simply borrowing someone else's belief. That you must investigate reality independently, even if this is what your teachers have taught you, what your parents have taught you, and what everybody in your community says is the truth. You have to, if it's going to be truly yours, examine it and see if it is indeed true. Because you're going to find, as our society continues to spiral out of any sort of moral center, holding it gravitationally together, that all of the presumptions we may collectively have had no longer apply or exist, so that each person has to sort of create his or her own philosophical and spiritual microcosm in order to subsist. Well, I want to turn to a Baha'i definition of faith. It's only one definition, but I find it a very convincing definition and a very useful one as it responds to this Western notion. And I say Western, it's not totally Western anymore because unfortunately or fortunately, the whole rest of the world has appropriated for itself the Western perspective. That's why there are McDonald's in China. This is a quote from the Baha'i writings. Now, the Baha'i writings consist of the writings of Baha'u'llah, who was the prophet and founder of the Baha'i faith, equivalent in Christianity to Christ, equivalent in Islam to Muhammad, equivalent in Judaism to Moses. And one of the statements in the Baha'i writings says the following. And he's talking about the difference between a person who acts well, who does good deeds, and a person who knows the basis for those good deeds. So this is kind of taken out of the context of a whole discussion on the relationship between, is it enough simply to do good works, or do you have to know? Now, of course, this is a big discussion in Christianity because Protestantism is called Protestantism because it protested against what the Catholic Church was saying, and Martin Luther posted his theses on the church door in the 16th century, saying, according to Paul, you're not saved by works, you're saved by the affirmation of your faith, your belief. You're only saved by your belief. The Catholic Church said, you're saved by a three-part process: contrition, confession, and expiation of sin. And the contrition was you feel bad about it. The confession was you tell the priest, and the priest will give you some penance to do, which will expiate or purgate that sense of sinfulness from you, and you'll feel good again. All right. Which meant, in effect, you got to do something to earn forgiveness, whereas the Protestant church said, no, you get forgiveness because Christ died for your sins, and we're all forgiven. So there's nothing you can do to earn salvation or forgiveness. Well, we'll get back to that because that's a biggie. But here's a definition of faith in the context of a discussion about that very thing. Although a person of good deeds is acceptable at the threshold of the Almighty, yet first it is to know and then to do. Although a blind man produceth a most wonderful and exquisite work of art, yet he is deprived of seeing it. Consider how most animals labor for man, draw loads and facilitate travel, yet as they are ignorant, they receive no reward for this toil and labor. Well, a bag of oats maybe, which is okay, but intellectually they don't understand what they have accomplished. The cloud reigneth, roses and hyacinths grow, the plain and meadow, the garden and trees become green and blossom, yet they do not realize the results and outcome of all these. The lamp is lighted, but as it hath no consciousness of self, no one hath become glad because of it. Moreover, a soul of excellent deeds And good manners will undoubtedly advance from whatever horizon he beholdeth the lights radiating. In other words, it will have a value. But herein lies the difference. By faith is meant first conscious knowledge, and second, the practice of good deeds. In other words, there is a context in which that knowledge becomes manifested or motivates your action. Now, let me put it more simply. First, there is to know, then to do. What is the principle involved that motivates you to do this good act? Why is it considered good? What do we mean by good? Good in relation to what? Once you understand that, then you are motivated to act, and that action will in turn increase your understanding of why it's good, which will increase your ability to carry out that knowledge and action, which will in turn increase your, and so you have this inextricable reciprocal relationship between knowledge and action, which this definition I just read said is the definition of faith. Neither one by itself is a definition of faith. Faith is a process, not an event. So it's not something you can simply say, I've got faith. No, faith is an ongoing process, an ongoing relationship within yourself. Now I'm going to turn to sort of pull this together to a passage from the most holy book of Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah wrote hundreds of books during his 40 years of imprisonment. But the two pivotal books of his dispensation, of the scripture of the Baha'i faith, are the Book of Certitude and the most holy book. One is about knowledge and one is about action. Together, they are about faith. Now I'll explain. In the beginning of the first paragraph of the book, the most holy book, the Book of Action, Baha'u'llah makes this statement. The first duty prescribed by God for his servants is the recognition of him who is the dayspring of his revelation and the fountain of his laws, who representeth the Godhead in both the kingdom of his cause and the world of creation. Whoso achieveth this duty hath attained unto all good, and whoso is deprived thereof hath gone astray, though he be the author of every righteous deed. It behooveth everyone who reacheth this most sublime station, this summit of transcendent glory, to observe every ordinance of him who is the desire of the world. These twin duties, to recognize and do what he says, are inseparable. Neither is acceptable without the other. And you could restate it, neither works without the other. Or again, they're reciprocal. How can you be said to know? Christ said this. After Christ gave the law, or some of the laws, the most complete repository of the laws of Christ are in Matthew's chapter 5 through 7. At the end of chapter 7, Christ talks about the fact that not everyone who cries, Lord, Lord, is going to be saved or is of me. He who hears my words and does not follow them is like a man who built his house upon the sand. In other words, it's not enough to understand who I am and what I'm here for. Show it in your actions, or else your knowledge means nothing. Faith, in other words, he is saying, as I understand it, or one way of looking at it, is knowledge of who Christ is, why he has come, and what he's telling you to do, and then doing it. Otherwise, if you say you believe and haven't acted it out, your belief is theoretical. and only theoretical. Now there's a whole digression I could get in, which is thoroughly interesting, but not, we don't have enough time for it, where the Apostle James gets in this sort of debate with Paul about which is more important, deeds or faith, and they're both saying the same thing, but in different ways, and they both use the same example, the example of Abraham's willingness to slay his first son, which according to the Old Testament was Aaron, and according to the Quran was Isaac. But it doesn't matter. Suffice it to say, Abraham was willing to do whatever God told him to. And so James says that shows that without his willingness to follow through, his faith was not demonstrated, was not sufficient. And Paul says, if he hadn't had faith, he wouldn't have been willing to do it. So you can see that they're really both saying the same thing, that there's this inextricable link between knowing and doing. Now, we can get back to that if you want. To confirm this, then Baha'u'llah has, as I said, bequeathed to us two principal works for this day, this dispensation, for his religion. The first is the Book of Certitude. Now, certitude means what? Anybody? What does certitude mean? Pardon? Being certain, being confirmed. Pardon? Having faith. Again, all four of those terms we use: to understand, to know, to believe, to have faith in. Now, in some religions, you induce faith, and because we think of certitude as, what is it? As an emotion, as an emotional thing. Do you believe? Yes, I believe. It's an emotional reaction. But certitude, according to Baha'u'llah, is an intellectual understanding of processes and principles. And so this book is not emotional, not particularly poetic. It is an essay proving that God has, throughout human history, sent representatives of himself to educate and assist humankind. And this has the proofs of that process. And that's what it is. He calls it, the generic name that Baha'u'llah uses is my argument. He calls it an argument, but he's using the term in the academic sense of a discourse, a proof, all right? Not a confrontation. So this is a proof, and he says it's not only a proof of who he is, but it's a proof sufficient to prove the reality of all the prophets of God. And he sums them up in the end with about 4 succinct definitions or types of proof. But the first 100 pages is an explication of 3 verses from Matthew chapter 29 about the return of Christ. So it's very interesting. So in other words, this is intellectual understanding, and this is the guidebook of how to put that understanding in action. This is the book of personal law, family law and guidance, and community structure and guidance. Interestingly, though the Baha'i faith has as its principal vision of the future and even its present action around the world to create a global community, but beginning at the grassroots level, the focus of this book is not on some global structure. The focus of this book is on daily refinement and spirituality, as acted out in a healthy family, living in a healthy neighborhood. And so right now, the faith, which is the second most widespread religion in the world, is uniformly throughout the world trying to construct models of community building. Communities based on spiritual principles of interaction and of collaboration. No Baha'i, I hope, will ever ask you to accept anything of what we assert about these principles without first asking you to examine it for yourself. I remember one day in an art class when I was in the 9th grade, I was studying fractions and we weren't getting it, my friends and I. We were able to do the problems, but we didn't really understand the concept of fractions. I mean, I guess we knew on some level they were parts of something, or I don't know what we knew. We knew how to get the right answer, but she, in about 2 sentences, clarified it for me, and I'm telling it to you because obviously it stuck with me. That's how good a good teacher can be. They can say one thing and everything is cleared up. And she heard us grumbling about it. She said, look, and she drew a pie on the board. And she said, let's divide this pie into parts. How many parts? And somebody said 4, so she made it into 4 parts. She said, that's the denomination of these parts. And she put a 4 and she put a line over it. Denominator, denomination. It's a 4-part denomination. And she said, now, we'll give Harry a piece of the pie. And so she took away one of the pieces. Now, how much did we give him? How many pieces? He said, 1. So she put a 1 over the 4. That's the numerator. That's how many parts of that whole. So the bottom number tells you how many parts you've got, and the top number tells you how many parts you want in this piece of the whole. It's simple, and I know you probably all use this example yourself in teaching your children and so on, but it opened things up for me. Now, what does that have to do with faith? Suddenly, instead of just knowing how to do the fractions, I understood the concept behind it. Instead of just having faith that the formula I was being taught to utilize in getting the right answer, I understood the basis for that faith. I knew what fractions were about. What the Baha'i faith is telling you is that there is a logical explanation for religion throughout history, the logic behind why the Creator unveils religion in sequence the way it has occurred, and why the conflicts among religions has occurred. Not because of anything the Creator got wrong, or that the founders of these religions got wrong, but because of what was done with what they brought. For a couple of reasons. One, because each religion is intended to serve humankind for a set period of time, either until that religion wanders far from what the teacher taught, or else because human society has advanced to the point that it's ready for the next grade level. And if you keep someone in the 1st grade going back over and over the same thing when they're ready for the 10th grade, you're doing them a terrible injustice. This doesn't mean you have to get them to rebel against the 1st grade teacher. It simply means you've got to get them to recognize you're ready to move on, and this teacher has served his or her purpose. So in other words, the Baha'i contention is that God knows what he's doing, and we use the pronoun he advisedly, realizing that there is no gender in this world of the spirit, but we have to use some appellation. So we use terms that the prophets had used before us, whether it's God the Father of Christ or God the tribal chieftain of Moses or whatever. This being has only our best interest at heart, and that what he has done throughout history is logical, understandable, and can become the basis for faith in a way that transcends a commandment by someone that you believe what they believe because either they want to chalk up one for themselves in the next world or because they're sincerely concerned about your spiritual well-being now and hereafter. But just because they want and sincerely desire that you be saved, you can't assume their perspective, their point of view, just because they command it. And so you can tell me over and over, Fred Astaire really is dancing on the ceiling, and I'm going to say, he's really not. I know you believe that, but I promise you there's another explanation. So if you say that any of the prophets claims the exclusive path to God, I will tell you, you may think so, but I assure you that is not so. They confirm each other's veracity. They support each other. They are a team who come to this reality to assist us. And they're not in conflict with each other. They're coordinated in their teaching plan, and they're waiting for us to catch up. And according to the writings of Baha'u'llah, this is the day in which man, or humankind, will catch up and understand that it's one process, one religion revealed in stages, and that we're ready to put it all together on this planet and begin to work harmoniously. Well, let me look at my notes real quickly and see if I have any profound closing thing to say. If not, I'm through. Nope, that's it. All right. Okay, clap. And stand up if you want to stretch. Seriously. And if you need to go, go. If you don't, ask questions. All right. Let's see. We've got a microphone we can pass around to anyone who wants to ask a question. Seriously, if you need to go, please feel comfortable in leaving. It won't hurt my feelings, and nobody will try to stop you that I know of. Yes, Hoda, did you say you have a question?
No, I said it's time for questions and answers if anybody does have questions. Yes, if you would please raise your hand, I will bring the microphone to you. Then you can speak to the microphone.
Excuse me, I would like to know if God knows what He's doing. Why do we have so many wars now, more than any time?
All right, her question. Everybody hear her question? She said, if God knows what He's doing, why do we have so many wars? There is a statement in the Baha'i writings that says this: if God had wanted, He could have made all people one people. But His purpose was not to create a static event, but to create a process whereby we learn through free will, by degrees, who we are and what we're doing. The best way we can understand that concept, why doesn't God intervene and stop this or that crisis and so on? There's two things you've got to know insofar as Baha'i belief is concerned. Number one, this isn't all there is. At the heart of our personal belief about ourselves as Baha'is is that what, your name is what?
Rosa.
Rosa. Rosa is working through that very attractive body right there, but Rosa in reality is a spiritual or metaphysical essence that your conscious self will endure beyond the demise of that body, infinitely, and will continue to develop intellectually, spiritually, and will continue to do, not in a physical realm. So in other words, we believe the physical realm is not the only life we have. Indeed, it is just the foundational beginning of our lives. And so it is purposefully veiled. Reality is purposely hidden from us, as if we were children in a classroom and we're trying to figure out what's the answer, what are the questions, you know, what's going on here? And you have the teacher leading you around. Well, what do you think this is about, or what do you think? In other words, the manifestations of prophets are guiding us through this classroom, trying indirectly. If you've ever taught, you know that, as with what we're talking about here, you can't impose learning. We said you can't impose love. You can't impose learning without free will. You can get someone to memorize something, but true learning comes from the desire to comprehend reality. So that's the first thing you need to know, that we don't believe our lives end here, that our lives continue on. So any injustice that you individually or that a group of us collectively endure in this life will be compensated for in the next world, that all of this will, and not at some one point, it's a process. In short, we all pick up where we leave off. So if you, Rosa, have striven to develop yourself spiritually and intellectually and so on, you will begin at that point and continue. Whereas if you have willfully rejected the desire to learn and have been abusive and ignoble in your life to other people, you will realize the consequences of that, and no doubt you'll feel bad, and hopefully you will be given up your own path. Let's put it this way. If God is sufficiently creative to produce no two people, no two souls alike, so that everyone has a distinct reality, then you can presume that inasmuch as no two people have the same life experience, not exactly, no two people have the same afterlife experience. In other words, God is sufficiently creative to deal with us on an individual level and not say, you group, you belong here, and good luck to you, even though you almost made it to the other group and you shouldn't be in this group really, but okay. This kind of group thinking it doesn't work in the afterlife anymore, it does in this life. How are you going to judge groups of people? You can't. Everybody is individual, dealing with things we don't know about, but we presume God does. The second thing is that we are a work in progress or in process, meaning the body politic, humankind on this planet. So we're learning individually and we're learning collectively and we're learning historically. That's the value of history. We know where we've been and we hopefully learn from that history. All right? And so why did 6 million people have to die in the Holocaust, or more actually, 10 million, or more than that if you include what happened in the Soviet Union? They didn't have to. It wasn't God's doing, it was our screwing up. What will we learn from it? Well, I can say this, having been born prior to that event and having witnessed what humankind has come to at this point, that I dare say anyone anywhere in the world who articulates such a narrow chauvinistic view of humankind that this group is inherently superior to that group will immediately be looked upon as speaking inappropriately, unjustly. In other words, that's a pretty good ways to come. Where you had a whole country and a lot of other people. I'm not saying you won't find individuals. So I'm getting long-winded. To cut to the chase, God allows us to screw up because over time we will benefit from it, and in the meantime, no one who has endured suffering because of that will not be given sufficient recompense in the continuation of their lives. All right? So it's a kind of simplistic answer. You'd have to, in other words, I don't mean by that I could give you could throw any historical event at me and I could explain to you the divine wisdom from it. I couldn't. The Baha'i writings say there are three kinds of fate. There are those things which are foreordained to occur and no power on heaven and earth can prevent them from occurring. One of them you and I are in the midst of now, and that is the transformation of this planet into one community. We may not like it, we may think it's a bad idea, but if you want your stockbroker to help you deal with your money, he's going to look at what's happening at the Hang Seng market tomorrow night, all right, to find out what your stocks are going to do Monday morning, because we have a global economy. We are a global community, and we need to fashion relationships and systems that will facilitate our working harmoniously together. We don't have a choice. That's what we've become. Okay. I don't know if I answered that question or not. I forget what the question was, but I talked a lot. Yes? Say what? Oh, three kinds of fate. All right, so some things are predestined. So the Baha'i writings say what is predestined is that we're going to have a global peace, a world peace, and a world community, and they even go into detail about the steps that will occur in the process of getting there, which if I had another couple hours, I could explain to you. I've got a PowerPoint I can send to you if you want. The second kind of fate is that which is contingent on human response. It may or may not occur depending on whether we respond well or poorly. All right? And then there are those things that just happen by pure chance. Like, the changes and chances of this world, as the writings call them. Okay? Yes?
It will occur. It's a promise.
What?
The changing of the world, the steps that you talked about, how these events will take place, and if you do good, they'll happen faster. If you do poorly, it'll take longer to make it happen. But this too is a promise that was also made by Christ
Exactly.
himself. It says, in the Lord's Prayer, very clear.
Well, in the Lord's Prayer, it's not a statement, it's a request. Thy kingdom come, which means may thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Yeah, so in its request, please let this happen. So yes, it is a part of Christ's teaching. He's very technologically slow, but he's a good person.
Well, if you look at reality as whole reality, continuation of physical reality and spiritual reality, and all these realities have axioms and laws that has to be basically applied or obeyed by, is it all the ills that we are suffering as humanities because we violated those axioms that was brought by the latest manifestation, that we're suffering because we do not apply those laws?
Yes.
Been causing the wars, basically.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly true. And the best analogy we can use in our own thinking about it is the subtle relationship we have with raising our children. On the one hand, we give them all the guidance we would hope they would follow from the wisdom we have learned. And they can choose to follow it or not. If they don't, they will suffer the consequences. And on the one hand, we might want to prevent them from suffering the consequences, but at some point we have to let them suffer the consequences because that's the only way that they're going to learn the reality of what we have said. So the answer is yes, according to Baha'u'llah. All people have access to understanding God through his manifestations. All people. All right? And this has always been true. So nobody has an excuse, if you will. And no people, no individuals. The concept of morality has been taught abundantly throughout the world, whether in tribal villages or in nations. Some of, as the Baha'i say, some of the religions are so ancient we don't even know their names. Maybe have a few archaeological remnants of a great society, and that's all. But all people are responsible. He says, how else could they be held accountable for their actions?
I want to ask you this question. A friend of mine, he's a rabbi, and in the Tablet of Ahmad, Baha'u'llah talks about who didn't recognize this beauty, did not recognize the messengers of the past. And when I discussed this subject with him, he has a hard time discovering or accepting Christ as a Messiah. So can you explain why it's so important for us as individuals who independent investigation of truth is so important and the progressive revelation? Why is it so important to recognize all these manifestations who came before Baha'u'llah? And if one who's stuck at religions in the past, what happens? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I'll answer the last part of that. And again, I speak with no authority. These are just my own thoughts. So please don't accept me as being an authority on the faith or speaking with authority. The last part of that question is important to me because I think we have to be careful that we, obviously, and I know you know this as well as I, that we don't judge people. People are judged according to what they do with what they got, and only God understands what they've been through and how they arrive at what they are, and plus, He's got infinity to figure it out. But to get to the first part of that, Baha'u'llah repeats what Muhammad said and what Christ said. Christ said, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I would have taken you under my wing like a mother hen with her chicks, but you would not. Oh, Jerusalem, killing the prophets and those who are sent to you." Muhammad says the same thing. If you deny any of these prophets, you have denied all of these prophets. Baha'u'llah says the same thing. That to reject any prophet is to reject them all, because they all come with the same purpose, come empowered by the same Holy Spirit, and are aware of each other, and they all have the same capacity. Baha'u'llah says they have two stations. One is the station of essential unity. This is what he talks about, one of the subjects he talks about at length in the Book of Certitude, when he talks about why this happens, why they get confused, why the tests. For example, Moses stuttered. Well, that was a test for people who are going to see this as man as authority, and he's stuttering. Baha'u'llah was short. Well, how can you believe that somebody that short is going to have authority? In other words, these are tests. Can you recognize the prophet? Christ is asked, how will we know these prophets? And he basically says, because they'll act like prophets. If you want to find a fig tree, find a tree with figs under it. You want to find a prophet? Find somebody who's doing things that a prophet should do. Well, how do we know? Study. Think about it. What are the evidence? What are the fruits of a prophet? They tell the truth. They exemplify the teachings they give. But getting back to what I say, the first station is the station of essential unity. That means they all have the same purpose, the same Spirit empowers them, but they have a second station, which is the station of distinction. That means that each comes at a particular time in history and therefore is constrained by the capacities of humanity at that time in history and the place they appear. All right? That's the differences among them. So that Christ taught as much as he could, according to the capacities of the people. He says, howbeit when he is the Son of Truth comes, he will teach you of all things and remind you of what I have said. And so, in other words, each prophet takes us as far as we can go for a period of time. Then it's time for a new lesson, a new learning. Yes?
I'm just going to share with you my feeling, with all due respect to you, that this is like, for me, it's no surprise what's happening in the world today. Killing, the financial situation, the hate, like this is no surprise to God. This is part of the grand plan. You know what I'm saying? And this is the stages that we were meant to go through in life to get to the great promises.
Yeah, you could say that what you're witnessing is the attempt of an antiquated and outdated system to deal with a new reality. It won't work. Even as Christ said, you can't pour new wine into old skins, because the old skin has become dried and inflexible, and it will burst and the wine will pour it onto the ground and be lost. All right? So you can't take this new us and new description of reality, that the world has become one global community, and use systems that are based on national sovereignty and think you're going to suddenly, that you can patch things up. That's another image Christ uses. If you put an old patch on new cloth, it won't work because it'll split and you'll be embarrassed. You can't patch up a system that was designed for a nation-state system on a global community. Yes?
Good evening. My question is in your studying your previous understanding of life, when do you think, not to make this a gloomy question or anything, but what do you think is the end of the testing of this world? When is it going to come to an end? Is it when Jesus comes back to visit, or when is it?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
When is the end of earthly life? Like the revolution?
Planet?
Excuse me?
For this planet?
Correct.
All right, the study of eschatology, as it's called, from a Baha'i point of view, the end times, the end of days, which is discussed in the Old Testament, the New Testament, and throughout the Quran. In the Quran, it's called the Day of Resurrection or the Day of Judgment. And in the New Testament, the second coming of Christ. In the Old Testament, the desolation spoken of by Daniel, and so on. And the Baha'i belief is very simple. We believe that the end that was talked about was the end of a process of preparatory growth, which we call the prophetic cycle or the Adamic cycle. It began with the prophet Adam, it ended with Muhammad, the dispensation of Muhammad. With the advent of Baha'u'llah, we believe, began a new era or a new cycle in the growth of humanity. And that point marked, we believe, the point of the beginning of the maturation of humankind. Now, the point of maturation in our individual growth is not the end of our lives, it's the true beginning of our lives, where we finally have beginning to get our act together and know who we are, and we have some autonomy and our own responsibility. So in other words, on the one hand, the concept of the end of days, the end of time, this whole concept of the end of the earth, we believe is a misunderstanding on the one hand. And yet, the Baha'i writings say very explicitly that in order for this new world, if you will, to be put together and so on, you will have to galvanize the will of the world leaders. And what will bring that about? And what the writings say is because the old system will gradually become more and more faulty in its ability, or grind to a halt, as it were. So if you mean when will the suffering we're witnessing now halt, it will be when we've learned our lesson sufficiently well to realize we can't live the way we've been living. But it's not going to be an instant transformation. All growth is a process. And so, as I say, the Baha'i writings describe various parts in that process. The first one, if you will, I mean, it's already begun. It began a long time ago. It began when Baha'u'llah appeared. And he said, he didn't say, God willing, the world will become one country. He said, the world is one country and humankind are its citizens. He didn't say this, he says it's already happened. And then he wrote to the kings and rulers and said, and here's what you must do to facilitate that reality. And he gave them specific plans or programs to implement. They obviously paid no attention to him. And he wrote again. And he said, okay, you've rejected the easy way. It's going to happen anyway, but it's going to come through a great deal of difficulty and trial and sorrow and so on. And of course, we've seen the First World War, the Second World War, and all the other wars going on. So if you're asking when will the difficulty cease and this global community we're talking about begin, from a Baha'i perspective, it's already begun in the sense that the Baha'i community is implementing this structure now. And this community in St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Tampa, all over the world. Right? But if you're asking when will the world at large have in place all of the systems it needs to live happily and felicitously without so on, that will be a long process, step by step, ingredient by ingredient. The first thing that will occur will be a pact, the Baha'i writings say, agreed to by the world leaders, where they will cede a portion of their own sovereignty to make a larger reality. As part of that pact will be a system of collective justice, whereby should any nation arise against another nation, all the other nations collectively will put down that aggressor nation, and so on. And it will involve management of the earth's resources, all kinds of things. And as I say, the process is spelled out by Baha'u'llah over a long period of time, what will happen. I've written a book on it, if you're interested, called The Ascent of Society. You can get it through Amazon or whatever. But that's what that book is about, how we get from where we are to where we're going. Okay? Anything else? I've pretty well done you in, haven't I? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hatcher. A world of knowledge. I would like to invite you to the other room to have some dessert and socialize, please. Thank you for coming. Thank you very much.